Oh, some really interesting things popped up in episode 8 of the Idaten Deities No Only Peace. This episode kind of just dropped out of nowhere after a delay. I'm kind of curious if they'll end up having the other episode on Thursday or if they'll just, skip it, but we'll see. But yeah, so far on episode 8, a lot of crazy stuff happened, a lot of fighting happening between all the characters. Obviously, we had Hayato fighting against Takeshita, the Emperor, and then obviously on this other side, Rin fighting against Brandy. And it was funny because the entire time Ren's fighting Brandy, she's like, she came there half expecting that she's going to die. And the entire time Ren's falling for all these stupid little tricks that she's doing. And she's like, wow, she's incredibly gullible. It's like, yeah, Ren hasn't really been around people much. Ren doesn't really know the concept of deception and stuff like that. So I guess it makes sense. But just to cover what happened with Hayato's side. So obviously Hayato's fighting the Emperor. Gil is there and she's panicking, trying to figure out why there's a god here that is fighting the Emperor. And it doesn't seem like the Emperor gives Hayato much difficulty. They fight for a little bit. Hayato takes a couple really nasty blows, but being because Hayato doesn't really, suffer much with, impaling and stuff like that, he's able to overcome the Emperor and eventually beat the snot out of him and knock him down. And as Hayato defeats him, he doesn't kill him. He doesn't finish him off. And the Emperor's like, I guess he just only cared about winning. As Hayato leaves, Gil comes back and goes to the Emperor and tries to take him to safety. Like, you need to get treatment for your injuries. You're very, badly wounded. And he's like, well, you need to know that I'm not human. I'm demon. He actually points out the fact that he weighs like 1,100 pounds. He's like, you're not going to move me, which is a little weird. I guess it's him kind of compacting his demon self within this human form. So he's actually a lot bigger than what he seems like, I guess. Or maybe that the aspect of him scaling to weight is different because he's a demon. But yeah, she falls over and he's like, it's fine. I can die right now because I was flashed by a cute lady. And she like panics and he's like, yeah, that's actually a good thing. Even after 20 years, my wife still insists that we, sleep in bed with the lights off. Modesty in a woman is a nice thing. But this is where he kind of feels that her nature of trying to, seek him aid is a nice thing. And so he mentions to her, you should flee. He's like, you should know that eventually the hunting of humans is going to happen again. This is something that is going to happen. You should flee to Hotena because, demons are going to come after the humans again eventually. And she's like, the fact that you are, why does it have to be that way? The fact that you are, basically seeking to, tell me this is proof that we can coexist. There's almost an olive branch kind of thing happening here, the seeking of some sort of, connection between human and demon, which was kind of nice. But yeah, this cuts to Hayato. He eventually finds one of these little portals where these Idens are birthed from, right in the middle of Zobel. And it kind of mentioned the idea that, yeah, everything is in place right now for the summon of an Iden. There is tons of thoughts and there's tons of prayers of salvation. All these things are in play perfectly for an Iden to be birthed. And Hayato finds it. And he pulls it. And it kind of lays out this idea that, yeah, all the criterias are here, but the appearance, the sex, the personality, and the name and everything is all based on the biggest source of all of these, which is obviously Gil. Gil is the one amidst all of this destruction that is playing for something positive, something good, some sort of beacon of hope within this massive massacre. And yeah, sure enough, what he pulls out of there is another Gil. So I always had like this big question mark of like, how are they going to fold Gil into this? Because they keep having her in the background, obviously wants to help. She's like crying out that she wishes she has the power to do something. And sure enough, it comes in the form of her duplicating herself as an Eden, basically. So now there's two Gils. And one is basically being pulled around. Well, not really being pulled around by Hayato. Hayato pulls her out, and then immediately he's attacked. And then she rushes off with him because apparently she's super fast as an Eden. So, or at least her Eden self is super fast. So yeah, that's kind of one of those things where, yeah, eventually Prantea finds him, finds Gil, this Eden Gil running off with Hayato and kind of goes, oh, well, you made it, a new Eden appeared. Okay, that's interesting. And then he goes back to Zobel and ends up running into the human Gil. And then that's the point in which he's increasingly fascinated by this concept. He's like, I just seen you. Can you teleport? he kind of quickly establishes that, yeah, this is a human, and I just seen an Idaten. So something's curious here. And he quickly kills some other demon, and she's like very upset about that. And he's like, I like this. I like this. He just like very easily takes out this demon. And she's like, how could you take a life so casually? She even slaps him. And he's like, would you still have criticized me if I were weaker and fought a more desperate battle and still won? It's like, yeah, I guess technically that would have been a little bit different. Because she just kind of points out the idea of how one-sided it was and everything and how cruel it was. And it's like, well, what? So it's different if I was weaker and we still have the same fight? I just won easier. That doesn't make any difference. But anyways, he knocks her out, and he's kind of very curious about her. So this is really posing a good question. And I'm curious if this is where it's going to take it. I've always kind of wondered why, if somebody doesn't care for the life of humans, couldn't they essentially just manufacture Idatens? Like, all you would have to do, and this is a really cruel thought, but go with me because this show so far has not very much strayed away from cruel concepts that would technically be at play. Not that it's terrible to get into, but that it technically fits within this world. So there's nothing really saying that, Prontea and Yeasley couldn't just capture a whole bunch of humans, stick them inside of a cage, prod at them with electrical prods to make Eden summon. There's nothing in there that says that's an impossibility. There's nothing that says that there's nothing that can keep that from happening. So I'm curious if that's where they're going. Because they've essentially established that Gil can do this, or Gil herself at least had enough powerful thoughts that she herself manifested as an Eden. I'm assuming that probably they're just going to just bring both of them together and go, wow, her thoughts were so incredible, she made this. That's curious. I don't think they're going to go as far as going, okay, well, Gil, start making a whole bunch of Gils. They could, and I can totally see them going that direction, but it is an interesting thought. It is interesting, the idea that they're insinuating that somebody could have such powerful thoughts of salvation that could create an Eden. But yeah, things got even more crazier on Ren's side as she continued to fight Brandy. Eventually, Brandy utilized she made a puppet to make it seem like that puppet was puppeting everything, but even though she was puppeting everything. And this was tricking Ren over and over again. Eventually, she got fed up with it, regenerated herself, grabbed one of these strands of hair, and just pulled everything into a ball and then shattered it all. And yeah... Over M or Obami shows up and he remembers things. Again, we've previously established the idea that Obami is an Eden that was summoned from the thoughts and desires of salvation from the demons and the Edens within the seal of the demons. And this is affecting Obami because he is recalling memories of Rin. And so he says, yes, I remember back when you were fragile and young. I remember this guy that gave you that sword. I remember you being afraid, but never wanting to be alone. The way that he stands and everything is exactly like Rin's grandfather. And so obviously Rin is making a major connection with Obami based on the idea that Obami essentially has all the memories of these Edens that she cherished so much, including more so than anything, the grandfather. So I think at this point, they're kind of establishing that similar to Gil and the Eden that was born from Gil, that Obami is probably, a majority of him is probably her grandfather. Like, he is probably the strongest sense within all of that birthed an Eden. So thus, he's going to probably have a closer resemblance to her grandfather. Now, what really terrified me here is that Ren starts sobbing and crying out to her grandfather in Obami. And technically cut off short because, yeah, Brandy sees the opportunity, grabs her sword, and does this insane attack because the sword is so powerful that it wipes everything out, and then Ren gets ticked off and kills Brandy. What I really thought the direction they were going here was to have Ren essentially become the bad guy controlled by Obami. I would probably have been extremely frustrated at that point because that would be one of those things where Ren completely gives up everything she's ever known for the last 800 to 900 years to follow some random guy that has some sort of resemblance to her grandfather, but I wouldn't really put it past them. It would have been an interesting shift in everything for sure, but it did give a lot more to Ren's character for sure. I'm just curious what they'll do with that going forward. It is a solid concern, the idea that if she's willing to be swayed that much, what will happen when that seal gets broken and probably a form taking of her grandfather comes out of that is not technically her grandfather. She will probably just see it as this is a rebirth, which then establishes the idea that not only do we have the threat of this Idaten that was birthed of all these demons, which is, Abami, but also the threat that Ren would side with them. But yeah, at the very end of the episode, we obviously have Miku. She did flee and make it out along with Umeo and this random nurse. And she's claiming that she's got to start from scratch, start over the demons. Now, granted, she's not the only one. I mean, we do have Miku, Umeo, the nurse. They are fleeing to do their own thing. Technically, they did get Barcode and also the politician that will rebuild the nation. And then, of course, everybody else that he's already rewired. So that did cover all the demons. They managed to somehow let 3 of them flee. Yeah, still hitting on some interesting ideas. I guess, like I said, I'll probably be back here in a couple days if they release an episode this week. Do my impressions on episode 9. But I hope you guys enjoyed my impressions of episode 8. If you did, leave a like down below. Comment, let me know what you thought of the episode. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share this video if you can. And support us on Patreon if you can. And y'all take care.